like to welcome everyone to the February 5th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Tonight on the agenda, we have one public hearing, three letters of recommendation, one information report, one correspondence item, two capital project plans, and one other item. Can I get a roll call of commission members, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Helfrey.
Here.
Commissioner Rubis.
Here.
Commissioner Cohn. Commissioner Broyles.
Here.
Commissioner Clayton. Here. Commissioner Depler.
Here.
Commissioner Depler is here. Commissioner Jackson. Chair Beatty.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
And Mayor Boland.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's hear. Can I get an approval of the minutes from January 16th, please? Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, motion passes with Commissioner Broyles abstaining. Thank you. Does the Department of Planning have any opening comments?
No, sir, Mr. Chair, but thank you all for being here.
Thank you. All right, let's hear it. This time we'll go into the public comment session. So all public comments on any of the agenda items other than the public hearing, now is the time to speak. And Travis, remember, and as a reminder, 3-minute time limit.
Correct.
Mr. Newberry?
Mr. Chair, the first speaker is Ms. Link.
Hello, I am Lynn Link and I live at 4028 Indian Ridge Estates. And I'm speaking out against the Ameren cell tower. In looking at this, I'm sure you all know about the elevated health risks. And there's a published medical article on the National Institutes of Health, National Library of Medicine that cites 86 studies that says avoid placing cell towers and even small antenna cell towers close to schools and homes. There's another article on the NIH that I just looked up that said radio frequency sickness, cancer, changes in biochemical perimeters, considering all the studies reviewed globally, 0.3% showed effects, 73.9% radio frequency sickness for cancer, 75% for changes in biochemical perimeters. Furthermore, studies that did not meet the strict conditions to be included in this review provide important supplementary evidence. So essentially, it says these articles say that there's a real health risk to people and where they're placed. And I know it's going to be in a more rural area, but I assume there will still be people and animals that will be exposed to this. And I know that I've seen, especially in Ellisville, when they were building one close to a school, and I believe it also was Ameren as well. I think you have to consider, even though it's public domain, you're doing it for the good and so that I can be on my cell phone, you really have to consider the health risks and maybe ask a lot of questions of Ameren on the amount of radiation and EMFs that are going to be emitted from this, and the amount of homes that are within a distance. And you know that in the European Union, they will not allow a cell tower within 5,000 feet of a school or a church because of the increase in pediatric cancer. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker card is Mr. Doster.
Thank you, Chair Beatty, members of the commission, Mayor Boland. My name is Mike Doster. My office is at 16150 Main Circle Drive. I'm here on the first item under new business. We're requesting an extension of time, and I'm just here to answer any questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you for your comments.
The next speaker is Mr. Bean.
Good evening. My name is Russell Bean. I am here representing Ameren on their request to place a 199-foot monopole style wireless communication facility at 18824 St. Albans Road. Our first run at this proposal, while I did meet what we felt met the requirements of the city and the Missouri Uniform Wireless Communication Act, was recommended for denial by staff. The Planning Zoning Commission, on recommendation by the mayor, asked that this proposal be postponed so that the city and Ameren could meet to discuss a more amenable location for this tower. At this meeting, it was discussed to move the property further within the wooded section of the property that would be more amenable to the city. And it was also agreed that in lieu of a 10-foot masonry wall, that we would be able to put in a chain link fence with brown vinyl security slats. While our latest staff report recommends a 10-foot masonry wall, Ameren would respectfully request that we be allowed to, in lieu of the wall, put up a 7-foot fence with brown vinyl security slats. We'd like to, if we can, sorry, I'm trying to read this in my 3 minutes. We would like to refer to the following sections of the Missouri Uniform Wireless Communication Infrastructure Deployment Act. In the definitions, applicant is any person engaged in the business of providing wireless communication services or the wireless communication infrastructures required for wireless communication service who submits an application. The definition of wireless communication service includes wireless facilities of all services licensed to use radio communications. And 67.5094 prohibited acts by authority is impose any requirements or obligations regarding the presentation, appearance of facilities, including but not limited to those, the kind and type of materials used relating to arranging of screening and landscaping. Ameren has worked very hard to work with the city. The city's worked with Ameren and let them know that the importance is the reliability of their system and the customer affordability. They've met with council members Garatino and Eden and walked the lines of the district to show where the landscaping and vegetation management would be best provided. The director of operations and team sat down with city staff to discuss the concerns of our LTE. Ameren has addressed previous concerns about the laydown yard. And Ameren has agreed to a $0 transfer of property to the city of Wildwood for the city's new roundabout at Ballard Park of 109. We would ask in the spirit of cooperation that you would relieve us of the 10-foot wall and in lieu of allow us to build the 7-foot fence with vinyl security.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, excuse me. The next speaker is Mrs. Vedvig.
Jean Vedvig, 16709 Clayton Road. I'm here and I'm going to ask you a few questions and hopefully we can get answers tonight. So after, this is regarding the development, the soilless operation. After tonight, what are the next steps in the process? Like what kind of meetings are going to occur and what do they have to do to go to the next step? And what does the city do? It's been suggested that there is work being done in the greenhouses. Any new owner cannot conduct a commercial type business in a rural residential area. Is that right or wrong? I'm hurrying so I can get my 3 minutes in. Can you explain how this request made it this far through the process? Farm Nursery started in 1950 prior to the incorporation. The new business is a non-conforming and not entitled to a continued use. I know they're not doing a continued use, but they're not entitled to this type of activity in what I understand. If they're conducting business type activity, what will the city do? If they're doing it right now, since the last meeting, has the petitioner contacted city and made their plans known? If a corporation pays $920,000, I would ask, what can they do? What are they doing? Because they're not doing retail, does this give Soilus permission to do other commercial type activities other than a residential use? And that is what the property owners in the surrounding area thought they were buying, is rural residential property, not commercial research.
1 minute.
That's so disturbing. Thank you.
Would you rather me cut you off?
Oh, I have a minute left. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, I'm having an issue with Ms. Depler getting back into the meeting. Ms. Henson is the next speaker.
Tracy Henson, address is on the card. I'm a Questover Canyon Drive neighbor. And we're all here again, but I've looked around and I don't think Solis is here, which I think speaks volumes for how they behave. It's been about 5 months now of all of this, and not one time have they met with the neighbors who would all love to talk to them, have a greenhouse tour, see what they're doing in there. But what we can see what they're doing in there is that the lights are on, just like they're not supposed to be. They don't have a permit. They don't have greenhouse operations. They don't have an actual business that would be grandfathered in. So what are they doing? The lights are on. Smoke is coming out of one of the greenhouses. They're operating without a permit. So I think that speaks volumes for how they are. As far as Ameren goes, part of that is on my land. And they've not been the best neighbors with the gravel yard. I've looked at some research on telephone lines, things like that. I get it. But my only ask is that whatever you ask Ameren to do, be sure that there's some process for how they clean it up. Because if you go look on that land, there's concrete all across their property. It's spread out through the woods. There's, it looks like a concrete sheathing that might go within poles or something like that. That's all spread out through the woods. The trash from that Ameren property is all over that property. In addition to that, they also have, they just put down like, I think a straw to protect that ground, which is great, but it then washed out and it's all across the creek and it came all down the creek, down to us and clogged up our portion of the creek. So whatever they end up doing there, please require they clean it up because they haven't in the past. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Frank.
Hello, all. Just a simple one. Just want to continue to thank you for you guys listening to us every time talking about 1823, 2325. Memorize those numbers now in my sleep. But, basically, I just want to continue to, talk about how we are against it. Like she mentioned, they're doing something over there. No big deal. But, yeah, the rain certainly washed all that stuff down in there. So if it can wash straw and hay, which is not bad, no big deal. Eventually in the long run, imagine if it can get stuff that we can't see. And, we did get a nice 4 inches of rain, which was great. But, that's all we're thinking about. The lights and all the other stuff that we've mentioned at previous meetings that we won't spend 3 minutes up here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Salvatore.
Tony Salvatore, 2701 Autumn Run Court, and mayoral candidate for the city of Wildwood. On January 16th, I came over here and spoke against Solis, and I also spoke what kind of problems we have already have here in Wildwood with the Bliss site and numerous contaminants that are up to 60,000 times the legal limit. Furthermore, this time I want to talk about the 200-foot tower, which is going to be placed at the lowest level, right at the lowest points of the area. Whether when you put a tower in, you always try to put it at the higher end and make the tower smaller so it can go ahead and reach more of their customers. It's just a line of sight. Additionally, I don't know if you ever heard Mr. Elon Musk and Starlink. It's a global phone service, and it is currently available throughout the world. He's got almost 35,000 satellites in the air in low orbit, and you can access Starlink just about anywhere on Earth. So we're putting up all these cell towers, and I'm going to be taking them down here shortly because he's making them obsolete. Meanwhile, you also heard there are some medical problems with certain radio waves and from the cell towers. And having been a pilot for many years, let me tell you, they always told us our radars were safe and everything else, but they weren't. You know, a lot of the pilots came down with very terrible cancer from the risks of the radar, infrared, and other how'd you call it, cancer-causing agents that we were dealing with. But other than that, it's not really economical to put a 200-foot tower at the low end of any area as far as elevation. Additionally, it is already, it's going to be extinct in a few years. Let's not do that. I'm against it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, this department does not have any additional speaker cards for the public comment session.
Okay. Looks like we got one coming.
Mr. Gerler.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good evening. Tim Gerler, 2727 St. Albans East Drive. Excuse me, Ward 6. Here to speak about the Ameren. That was 1823. Just a couple things as a reminder that I would point out from the meeting back in November and October of last year. The reference page, well, it's actually unmarked on here, but it's elevation that's listed there. So to the previous point, just about the location of the tower, there's approximately 152 feet of elevation change from the location that was desired by Ameren to put that tower to the top of the hillside closest to it, which also encompasses approximately 8 different homes. So I'm just trying to understand, just from a logical standpoint, why we'd put a 199-foot tower in a 150-foot valley, and the usefulness of that. The second comment I would have about location is, while it might be a little bit more appeasing aesthetically for the city that pole is moved away from the road, and while I would agree with that, unfortunately, the unintended consequences of that would be is that location is going to be even closer to people's homes and where their kids are going to be playing and where they're going to be living. So I would hope that it wouldn't get pushed any farther back into the woods and closer to people. The last thing I would point out with Ameren and kind of where we started last year with them is that when they first came to this board, it was made that they were out of compliance with their location and how they were operating that without a permit for numerous years. And so my ask would be this, is that at the meeting tonight, I hope that we're not setting a precedent that if we act with bad behavior for years upon years and they don't follow the rules that this exact board set for them at that point in time, why would we reward them with the opportunity to put up a cell tower? That one of the main purposes of that, if you actually go and talk with Ameren, is so that they have a future purpose to then sell and rent space on that same tower to other public or private entities to use that same tower for their purposes. Okay, it's a rental agreement that they are looking at operating. It's very clear with Ameren what they're doing, not just here in Wildwood, but other places around the state. So please look into that. And lastly, with that, at the same time, that falls in line with that same thinking, is that it's also known that this piece of property is going to be getting sold, whether they put up that tower or not. You're already finally getting them to clean up the site. It's not completely cleaned up, as others pointed out, but there's already conversations that they're not going to be owning that site long-term. So why do we want to encumber the next owner with a cell tower or an Ameren tower, whatever you would like to call it, when there's going to be a new owner within a few months? The only other thing I would point out, and this is on tonight's documentation, this one doesn't have a page number, but it has a sheet number RF-1. And that's the 4 notices that are going to be posted on the fencing that's there, which again, if they are allowed, please make that look as appropriate as possible, which would not be a 7-foot fence. But there's 4 things, and I'll read them briefly because I know my time is running out. The worst of which says radio frequency fields at this site exceed the FCC rules for human exposure. The next one to that is radio frequency fields at this site may exceed FCC rules for human exposure. I'm very well aware that humans live in this area and have well before Ameren occupied that space as a laydown yard. And I would hope that we don't continue the mistakes that we made in the past to let them use that property. It was there for a very short
That's time.
purpose. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
No, no additional speaker.
Okay. All right.
There are some on Zoom. If someone on Zoom would like to speak. Yeah, I'm doing a meeting. If anyone on Zoom would like to speak, they can use the raise hand feature and we'll let them in.
I'm John Sapp, at 2619 Woodstone Trail Drive, and I'm the treasurer of Woodstone Subdivision. And I just want to say, it seems like these meetings are designed to wear people down. You had a whole bunch of people here 3 weeks ago voting on this exact same thing, and they all let their feelings be known, and you voted the 1823 and 2523 down. And yet here we are doing it all again. I don't, it's hard to understand. And then we got another meeting coming up after this. It just seems it's designed to just wear everybody down and then you can just do whatever you want. I don't know. It's very frustrating, let's say. But anyway, I do appreciate your listening to me, and you had a whole great big group of people here that let their feelings be known 3 weeks ago. And those feelings haven't changed. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And to respond to that, the votes, it's our procedure. Last meeting, we voted to reject their request for the CUP and changing the rules. And this month, we're just voting to confirm that action. So it's largely just a procedural vote tonight, just as a heads up. I can't speak for city council. All right. All right, so at this time, we'll go on to our public hearing. In the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning these posted items. Since these requests are being presented at a public hearing, no action is planned on these items tonight, and consideration of them is to be taken no earlier than the March 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This approach ensures the members of the commission will hear all opinions before taking any action. The city's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of its formal recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Anyone in attendance at City Hall tonight wanting to speak should fill out a speaker's card and leave it with Mr. Newberry. Those in attendance via the Zoom webinar platform should use the raise hand feature to indicate you wish to speak at these hearings. A team member will add you to the list of speakers, which will then be communicated to me as chair, and I will invite you to speak when it is your turn. The public hearing process is outlined in the public hearing guidelines pamphlet, which can be found on the table at the entry area to the council chambers. These guidelines are also provided on tonight's online meeting agenda. The commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their position as outlined in the public hearing guidelines pamphlet, Speakers who are designated as a group speaker representing more than 5 individuals will be allocated 5 minutes to speak. Those individuals representing themselves will be allocated 3 minutes to speak. In addition, information on these items can be found on the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. The commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearings. All right, Mr. Newberry.
PZ 1-24, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of amendments to Chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances providing for regulations governing marijuana facilities within the City of Wildwood, all of which will be consistent with Article 14 of the Missouri Constitution. Any consideration regarding possible new regulations associated with these facilities would be premised upon the City of Wildwood's protection of the public's health, safety, and general welfare through the application of its zoning and land use regulations in accordance with state statute and its charter, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vinich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, you may recall in November of 2022, voters in the state of Missouri authorized a constitutional amendment to allow for the growth, manufacture, testing, transportation, and sale of limited quantities of recreational marijuana. The city of Wildwood previously had addressed the sale of medical marijuana and those other 4 components as well when the Constitution was first amended on this particular subject. With the change to the recreational component of marijuana, the city of Wildwood is now again before the Planning and Zoning Commission and shortly City Council to address those components of this particular product. Tonight, the Department of Planning has prepared for you a primer that will, for the most part, address the concerns the city has relative to the use of town center for sale and other areas of the community where agriculture or farming is allowed for the growth, manufacture, testing, and transportation. For the most part, the department in its recommendation report, which it hopes to present to the Planning and Zoning Commission at its March meeting, is recommending that recreational marijuana be treated identically as medical marijuana, with limitations where all of those 5 components can occur would be in the industrial area of the city of Wildwood. And that's the Wildwood portion of the Chesterfield Valley. As you know, recently we've approved an expansion of fixed supply services, Kurt's Nursery. We're under consideration for a portable batch plant, and there are already industrial activities that occur there as well. To the department, and I believe the city attorney, it is an appropriate location because as the commission was explained several years ago, we cannot prohibit it. We have to find a place for it, and we believe we have an appropriate place. So tonight, the department is presenting the item for public input and commission questions. And then at the conclusion of the hearing, it will ask for permission to prepare the letter of recommendation for the next meeting, shortening the process so as we can address any potential requests for any of these components in a reasonable time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vinich. Any discussion? Mayor Bullen?
Do we have any speaker cards before I make a motion?
It looks like we have one.
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a speaker card from Ms. Link referring to this matter.
Still Lynn Link, and I still live at the same address. At the last month's planning and zoning hearing, the citizens overwhelmingly came out against Solus AgriScience using the former Farr greenhouse to do gene splicing and other potentially volatile plant experimentation, including possibly marijuana experimentation. Many issues were brought up by concerned residents, including in the increased risk to the environment as the property lies in floodplain. PZ 124 states, quote, can only be authorized within an M1 industrial district or M3 planned industrial district. According to the interactive property map, a large portion of that area still lies in floodplain and is almost adjacent to the Missouri River, so that risk would be actually increased. I note that Chapter 415-610 lists 8 zoning regulations and 8 operating component regulations, including, quote, the facility shall not sell to customers who are in the cars or who consume the sold products and cars on the park facility. Operating components include the facility shall be monitored at all times by internet-based closed circuit television for security purposes. Additionally, no person in the facility shall dispose of the process plant in an unsecured waste receptacle not controlled by the licensee. These are a lot of additional regulations. And another question brought up at last month, does Wildwood even have the resources to ensure Solus was compliant if the rezoning was approved? Who will be monitoring these facilities to ensure compliance with these regulations? Who will be enforcing and holding the facilities that fail to comply with these regulations accountable? And what will the additional cost to the city be to do so? Will the cost to regulate and enforce these rules exceed the cost of any anticipated revenue from taxation? Additionally, Missouri law allows for cities within the state to ban recreational marijuana dispensaries with a 60% voter approval. Missouri Amendment 3, allowing for the legislation of recreational marijuana, passed by a close 53-47 margin. In November, Des Peres residents will vote on whether or not to ban recreational dispensaries within their borders. This restriction would not ban medical dispensaries or infringe upon the citizens' right to legally use marijuana medically or recreationally. It would just give their local citizens more of a final say in the matter. Perhaps that would be a proactive step to allow the citizens of Wildwood to also have a final say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Let's hear Mayor Boland, or did you have?
Yeah, so if we have no other speakers, I would like to make a motion.
All right, no more speakers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my motion would be that we request the department to prepare a letter of recommendation consistent with its recommendation this evening as to treating the recreational marijuana dispensaries consistent with what we previously did as to growing and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second
Commissioner
that.
Clayton seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All right, should we do roll call vote?
Please.
Okay, all right. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubus, Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes. Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Mayor Boland also votes yes. Thank
All
you.
right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Mr. Chair, can we have a motion second to close the public hearing? And that can be done by a voice vote.
Okay. Commissioner Helfrey and second Commissioner Clayton. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, public hearing is closed. All right, PZ 18-23, Mr. Newberry.
PZ 18-23, City of Wildwood, Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of modifications to the city's code of ordinances, specifically chapter 415.030 definitions and chapter 415.090 NU non-urban residence district, section C, conditional land use and development permits issued by the commission, which would allow for the addition of a new conditional type use to the existing list of them for the purposes of allowing agriculture, research and development activities as a function of a rural land use setting, along with the corresponding definition of the same, all wards.
All right, thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you will recall, approximately 3 weeks ago, this commission recommended that the draft letter of recommendation be changed from an approval to a denial relative to this additional conditional use permit. The Department of Planning has revised the draft letter of recommendation now to reflect that vote for denial of the change. This particular item, if approved tonight by the Planning and Zoning Commission, would be forwarded to City Council for its February 12th, 2024 meeting for receipt and filing, and the matter then is closed unless the City Council should take up action. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mayor Boland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question to our city attorney. Is it possible, given that these are letters of recommendation, to handle this item and the next item collectively since they are related?
Mayor, because one item's legislative, the other is administrative, I would do them separately.
Okay, thank you. Then my motion would be that the letter of recommendation as presented be approved.
All right, Commissioner Helfrey seconds that. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Rubus.
Yep.
Commissioner Broyles. Commissioner Clayton.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes. Commissioner Helfrey.
Yes.
Chair Beatty.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
And Mayor Boland.
Yes.
And Mayor
All right.
Boland votes yes as well.
Motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Newberry, PZ 25-23.
PZ 25-23, Solus Real Estate LLC, care of Dustin Snyder, 18944 St. Albans Road, Wildwood, Missouri, 63038. A request for a conditional use permit, CUP, in the NU non-urban residence district to accommodate the use of the subject property, which is located on the south side of St. Albans Road, west of State Route 100, street address 18944 St. Albans Road, St. Louis County locator number 23Y220108, and over 5 acres in size for the purposes of authorizing agricultural activities, specifically the research and development of products that are to be sold with the intent to increase their yields, improve their drought resistance, encourage the use of less soil additives, and or promote other common goals relative to the growth in food production. These activities will occur in a controlled environment, including greenhouses and other buildings or structures. Proposed use, research, and development of agricultural products not intended for retail sale via an on-site sales room or within a traditional laboratory setting. Ward 6.
All right, thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration and action tonight the draft letter of recommendation regarding the request from the petitioner for a conditional use permit on the subject property. As the commission members will recall, with the action on the underlying regulations of the non-urban resident district, you were obliged at the January meeting to not grant this conditional use permit. This draft letter of recommendation now reflects your denial of such and is ready to be forwarded to the City Council, again for receipt and filing. If there are any questions, the department would be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Commissioner Helfrey?
Mr. Vunich, I just wanted to kind of follow up with some of these questions that were asked by some of the people earlier. This property is zoned non-urban residence, correct, currently?
Yes, ma'am.
And so there should not be any business being conducted on that property, correct?
Well, again, in the non-urban resident district, there are certain activities like plant nurseries and greenhouses, farming, things that aren't necessarily residential, but certainly can occur in a residential area without any undue impacts. So from the perspective of Solus Agrisciences, which I'm anticipating one of your questions, after the process is completed at City Council, again, when they receive and file the 2 reports acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission tonight, the matter becomes an enforcement action from this perspective of the city.
Okay, so in order for them to do the greenhouse businesses and things like that, do they have to have a CUP for that in non-urban, or could they just do that as part of a non-urban?
Again, a permitted use is commercial vegetable and flower gardening, including greenhouses and plant nurseries. The wholesale and retail components are what require a conditional use permit. And again, as has been mentioned by several of the speakers, our greenhouse started long before there was the traditional zoning ordinances of St. Louis County and now the city of Wildwood, and is grandfathered. They could have continued on as is, but any expansion or change in use is what prompted the process that we've been going through for the last 4 to 5 months.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure I understand. So they are currently, they can grow, but they cannot have retail or wholesale as it stands currently.
Well, and again, the interpretation of the department is for that particular use, they needed a change to the underlying regulations as well as a conditional use permit if the regulations were changed. I do not interpret what Solus Agriscience is doing as the same as Far Greenhouse.
Okay, thank you very much.
So if they had if they had just changed in ownership and kept selling like they were, everything would have been fine. But since they're changing what their model is, that's why we're here.
Yes, if they would have continued to have poinsettias for the holiday season and mums during the year and whatever else Far Greenhouse sold on a retail basis as well as wholesale, that grandfathering would have protected it. But with the change in ownership also came, in the opinion of the department, a change in use.
Mhm. All right. So you made the motion, right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'll make the motion to approve the letter.
All right. So motion by Commissioner Helfrey, second by Commissioner Rubus. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes, Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes,
Commissioner Rubus,
Yeah.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, sir.
And just to reiterate, these 2 items on Solus Agrisciences will be on the agenda with the mayor's permission for February 12th for receipt and file.
Okay. And if assuming current trajectory, then it's over after next week.
Yes, from the perspective of the city council and planning and zoning commission, yes, again, as mentioned, there's some steps in terms of enforcement that will follow from the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. PZ 19-23, Mr. Newberry.
PZ 19-23, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of modifications to the city's code of ordinances, specifically chapter 415.450, outdoor lighting requirements, which would add additional regulations to address aesthetic lighting sources that create a nuisance glare, loss of night sky, or trespass, inclusive of a low voltage types given such as currently less regulated of all the luminaires that are currently identified therein, all wards.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vinich.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration a draft letter of recommendation regarding what is described in the report as aesthetic lighting. The Planning and Zoning Commission endorsed new regulations to govern these low voltage sources, now being incandescent or light emitting diodes. The Department of Planning, in preparing that initial information report with recommendation, noted that there were 8 areas of possible regulation. Those 8 areas are now further defined in the draft letter of recommendation and talk specifically or identify specifically illumination levels, orientation of lamps, location, shielding, timeframes, nuisance, trespass and glare, maintenance, and then potential conflicts with other regulations. It is important to note from the department's perspective that since almost the inception of the city, we've had regulations relating to outdoor lighting requirements. Those regulations specifically address most of the traditional lighting that you think of when we talk about trespass, glare, nuisance, safety, and security. Here in our current regulations, we do not have the language necessary, the department believes, to address the low voltage or aesthetic type lighting, which we've seen an explosion in applications across the city as well as across the region and everywhere. So tonight, with the assistance of the city attorney, we have the proposed regulations before you as part of the draft letter of recommendation and are seeking final action of the commission on this item. If there are any questions or comments, the department be glad to answer them at this time, as well as our city attorney, who again, I would like to acknowledge him and his firm for the assistance in working through. What we found is not much out there about this particular subject, so we're addressing something that a lot of cities are talking about but have yet to step into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any discussion or motion? Commissioner Clayton?
I'll make a motion to approve the letter of recommendation.
Commissioner Broyle, second. Any further discussion?
Mayor.
Mayor Boland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wholeheartedly support this. One of the key things that distinguishes our city from a number of municipalities in the area is what I call light pollution. And this goes a long way to keeping that from happening that would completely destroy the character of our city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's hear. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler. Commissioner Depler votes yes as well. Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubis.
Yeah.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you. All right. PZ 13-23. Mr. Newberry, I guess.
PZ 13-23, Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, 1901 Shoto Avenue, MC 700 St. Louis, Missouri 63103, care of Susan Story Selective Solutions LLC, 340 Marshall Road, Valley Park, Missouri 63088. A request for a conditional use permit within the NU non-urban residence district for a 14.68 tract of land for which a portion of this lot is to be utilized for a monopole type telecommunication facility along with associated enclosed equipment area. This tract of land is generally located on the south side of St. Albans Road, State Route T, west of its intersection with State Route 100. Street address 18824 St. Albans Road, St. Louis County, locator number 24Y630140. Proposed use, a 199-foot telecommunications tower and related equipment area. Again, the tower is proposed to be a monopole type with exterior antenna arrays, Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich?
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration its information report with recommendation regarding this particular item. There is an item I do want to identify before I begin the formal presentation, and that is, I believe the revised set of plans that have been submitted in support of this request by the petitioner's representative shows a 195-foot tall tower. The original advertisement was 199 feet. So again, I wouldn't say it's a major difference, but the recommendation that's before you is for a 195-foot tower. Also, I do want to just spend a few minutes, if not that much, just kind of going through the evolution, so to speak, of the department's change in its recommendation. As has been mentioned, when this particular item was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission at its meeting in 2023, the department had recommended denial. And the denial was based upon the location of the tower, the treatment of the equipment compound area in terms of aesthetics, and just concerns about the visibility, not only of the tower itself, but everything associated with it. The speakers have been correct, representative of Selective Solutions, and that the Planning and Zoning Commission postponed any action on that initial recommendation of the department to allow time to meet with the petitioner and see if a solution existed on site. That meeting did occur in December, and ultimately the department expressed its concerns, its suggestions, and heard from representatives of Ameren, Missouri, as well as the petitioner's representative Selective Solutions. What the department has on the screen before the Planning and Zoning Commission and projected on the wall behind it is the overlay of the new design. And with the assistance of Mr. Newberry, I want to highlight just several aspects of it, which is the reason the department has altered its recommendation. First and foremost, Mr. Newberry, would you show the transmission line easement and the two nearest towers in association with those transmission lines? The little cursor is showing that, and then right where you see the shadows kind of projecting off, those are two of the towers that secure the high voltage transmission lines in association with the easement itself. Those are vertical obstructions, vertical improvements already in place in the valley. The easement, according to records that I have, was established in approximately 1925, long before this area saw any of the level of development it saw in the 70s, 80s, and on. So again, that is the area that the department was hoping the tower could be pressed against, so to speak, so as to put all of our vertical improvements in a single location and offset one by placing it next to two others. And Ameren, Missouri was willing to consider that. Also, the department asked Ameren, Missouri to move the equipment compound from the, let's say, center of the site into the fringe of that wooded area, utilizing existing vegetation to help screen it, along with any additional landscaping that is necessary after the more formal site development plan is presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The idea, again, is existing landscaping of a mature type, although a few trees, some trees will be removed, is the best screen from the perspective of the department than anything that can be put in place and wait for growth to occur. So again, from the perspective of the tower and equipment cabinet, we're trying to basically take advantage of what's already there, which is, for all intents and purposes, as unsightly as any tower, and put the tower as close in proximity to it for operational purposes. Secondly, to place the equipment compound area in the wooded area and use mature vegetation to support it. The department did investigate other locations on the site, and obviously the further east if you were to place the improvements, the problem becomes again the visibility and the lack of existing vegetation. And the department did not support going to a higher elevation. Higher elevation means access up the hill, which requires a greater amount of tree clearing, and ultimately will still be visible in many quarters of this area. So again, we think from the department's perspective, we found the best solution. Also, one last thing, as you can see, there is about 2 access points onto Highway T. They're unstructured. And again, from the perspective of the recommendation, we will require the Missouri Department of Transportation to set a single location, and Ameren, Missouri, through its position, through their representative, will have a single access point into and out of the site that's more formalized and obviously much safer. All told, the department believes that with the changes that have been made as represented on this overlay in association with the plan and the existing development, that there is enough there to comply with the model telecommunications ordinance and its criteria, as well as the 4 criteria set forth in the conditional use permit procedure of our zoning ordinance. I'll conclude by just stating a couple of things. This particular location will have to go to the Board of Adjustment for the setback components. And that's typical for tall towers. We've done it for the tower at Metro West Fire Protection District. We've done it for the tower at St. Alban Row, and I can continue that list. Again, tall towers relative to our setback requirements are difficult to manage. The same holds true for the 10-foot wall. That is a requirement of the underlying regulations. The Planning and Zoning Commission, as part of its administrative authority with conditional use permits, can't make our underlying regulations any less restrictive. You can't. And so they're in the report, but acknowledging that the setback issue and the wall will be under the jurisdiction or prudence of the Board of Adjustment. We've done this previously. It's been successful. And again, in this case, we believe we have a good location relative to this particular request. If there are any questions regarding this particular matter, the department would be glad to try to address them at this time. And I will defer to our city attorney on any of the legal components relative to state statute and all the things our legislature is doing to make life just a wonderful time for us here.
All right, Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make I understand this has been going on for a while, but I would like to make a motion to postpone this to the next meeting of the commission so that we can obtain elevations in terms of what this tower will look like, both in terms of vegetation rich times of the year and at times such as now when we don't have that. I think it's going to be essential for not only the commission, but also the Board of Adjustment to be able to see that for the benefit of our residents. And this plan has changed a fair amount since it initially started. And I think once it's in, obviously it's going to be there, and we need to do some additional due diligence relative to that. So that is my motion, that we postpone until we see those elevations. Thank you.
Commissioner Helfrey.
Well, Mr. Vinich, I want to second his motion, but I have some questions. So do I second it and then ask my questions? Okay, I second the motion and I have my questions. And therefore, so first of all, I thought that when this first came in front of us, I thought this was because Ameren needed this tower for their own business, that it wasn't a cell phone tower. Am I incorrect? Am I incorrect?
Ms. Helfrey, it's actually both. The top location for the antenna array is reserved for Ameren Missouri, and they use it as part of their monitoring of their electrical grid for outages, problems with lines, etc. So they are installing a network of these towers throughout its service area to basically relay information almost instantaneously about problems with the system, the condition of the system, and anything that needs to be addressed within the system.
Okay, so my next question is I have one more for you, but I'm going to ask this one of Mr. Young. Mr. Young, is it my understanding that we cannot say no to cell phone towers, but that we have some, because of state law, but that we can kind of control the way they look and things? Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
I would say to you that it's not that you can't say no, but state and federal law have significantly limited what you're allowed to review in approving or denying them. For example, there's been comment about the health risks, RF signals, et cetera. Federal and state law have both expressly stated you are not allowed to consider those in making your determination.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question for you, Mr. Bunich, is I took some notes about back when this first came in front of us, there were a lot of complaints about the property maintenance and that there was a lot of trash and a lot of things left on this property. And Ameren had said they were going to clean it up. And we had a couple of people come to us tonight and say that there is still trash on the property. It's in the woods, that some of their things have washed away down the creek. So I'm pretty sure that that should be cleaned up. And so my question is, are we able to tell them, get this cleaned up before we make a decision on anything else? Because my concern is that they're not going to take care of their property after they do it if they're not taking care of their property before they're doing it.
Well, there's two components to your question from my perspective, the department's perspective. First, when the department received a complaint regarding the boneyard, as it's called, and then the contractors for Ameren Missouri doing work in this area, basically setting up a satellite office and parking area, for the most part, it was closed down in probably 2 to 3 months. Our normal process, once I got the complaint, investigated the complaint, we began the process, and I will say Ameren was cooperative. They have till the beginning of March to basically complete the cleanup. That's what the Board of Adjustment gave them. They had to get the business out of there. They had to clean up the boneyard in a certain amount of time, October, December, as I recall. And then the restoration, which is the last step in the cleanup process, was given to March of this year. So they still have time. And it was March because we recognized, not knowing what winters are like anymore, January and February might not be the best time to basically do the replanting and restoration of the ground cover to the site. I believe they will complete it. The two individuals that were before our Board of Adjustment met with the group of citizens. Everything they said they would do, they've either done it before or on time, and I have no expectation this will be a problem. Obviously, if it isn't addressed by March, our process will extend well beyond March. This is the first action on the conditional use permit. It'll be back in March if there's not a postponement for final action. Then it goes to City Council and there's a 15-day period there. And then if all goes well, there's still the site development plan. And if they've not addressed the concerns of the city and the action of the Board of Adjustment, then the site development plan can be held until such is addressed. So the site will be cleaned up. And from the perspective of a equipment compound that's about 500 square feet in size and a monopole, really not much maintenance that is required once it's installed, inspected, and accepted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rubis? Correct, to postpone. If
Do you know or are aware of any plans by Ameren to sell property? I am not aware of any plans. In testimony provided under oath at our Board of Adjustment meeting, my recollection was Ameren's owned this property for a number of years and initially purchased it for the purposes of installing a substation, a breakdown point from the network of electrical wires. If they are planning to sell it, I don't know if that is something that we can consider. According to our city attorney, no. So we'll take it on the merits of what's before us. Certainly, if the commission doesn't believe the merits are favorable, then you have an option. Based on this request, OPM step on with the parties. The only two I would say that would not be acceptable is the setback requirement, which I mentioned due to the height of the tower and the shape of the site, and then the 10-foot wall. And again, the 10-foot wall is a standard condition in our model telecommunications ordinance. I can't show it not being there and have the commission act upon it. But the department would believe in this case that the vegetation is what I expect it to be, and the additional landscaping, that 10-foot wall would probably not be as aesthetically pleasing or compatible with the rural area. Sir, that goes beyond a telecommunications tower, and we spent a great deal of time in 2011 with representatives of Ameren, Missouri, and a consultant we hired that was an expert in this as well. When the petitioner wanted to expand the major substation at Route 100 and Route 109, and I was explaining to them that federal government protects them from those types of questions.
Anecdotally, not that anyone cares, my ex-girlfriend, like 20 years ago, lived right next to those lines in Chesterfield. Computers would not work in her house to save their lives. Former girlfriend, yes. I am not married to her now. Commissioner Helfrey?
Mr. Vinich, but the 10-foot wall, have we waived the 10-foot wall requirement on any other cell phone tower?
Yes.
Which one would that be?
The most recent one that was approved or granted a permit by the Planning and Zoning Commission at St. Alban Road Church. But remember, again, that is on a turf area. It's very visible from Old Etherton Road and Route 109 at its intersection of Shepherd Road. We required a 10-foot wall there.
But I guess maybe I read it wrong. Is there any place where we did not require a 10-foot wall?
Prior to the update of the model telecommunications ordinances, which was prompted by legislative changes at the Missouri House and Senate, we had generally tried to make them as less intrusive as possible. And we have used different varieties. We've used wood fencing. We've used chain link fencing with slatting that's vinyl coated. We've tried a different mix of things. And I think the key I would leave with the commission and those in attendance tonight is we choose the type of material and the enclosure based upon the individual characteristics of the site. Not all sites are the same.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right. Since it's just a postponement, voice vote is sufficient. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, motion passes, one abstention. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. PZ 2021 and 22-15, Mr. Rinich.
The review and consideration of a request by Michael J. Doster, petitioner's representative, being dated January 4th, 2024, regarding PC 20, 21, and 22-15 Ackerley Place, Payne Family Homes, LLC, care of Thomas Cummings, 10407 Bauer Boulevard, Suite B, St. Louis, Missouri, 63132, that requests a 12-month extension of time to allow for the submittal of the required site development plan, SDP, for this project to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its review and action for this site, which is located at the southwest corner of State Route 109 and State Route 100, located numbers 23V 110022 and 23W 320013, street addresses 2431 State Route 109 and 17225 Manchester Road. These properties are located in Ward 1.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Newberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, this matter relates to the residential subdivision that is located on the west side of State Route 109, south of the.
All right. Yeah, we'll let them exit and then you can continue.
Okay.
All right. I think it's quieted down.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This request relates to the residential subdivision that's located in Town Center on the west side of State Route 109. It was previously known as Ackerley Place. At the conclusion of its zoning process, the title of the name of the subdivision is The Reserve, just to give you a reminder of what this project relates to. Excuse me. In 2023, February 2023, the City Council approved the site-specific governing ordinance that authorized this development after a long zoning process before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. In that site-specific governing ordinance, there is a requirement that a site development plan be submitted and considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission. As you're aware, that has not occurred yet, and we are in February 2024, a year later. The department is in receipt of a request from the petitioner's representative requesting the 12-month extension of this timeframe. The ordinance considers the 12-month extension appropriate as an option, and the petitioner is requesting it at this time. And the department has no objections to the extension of the submittal of the site development plan. The petitioner's representative in his letter stated that there were just economic concerns that have not had the project move forward to the point of submitting a site development plan. So again, the department is offering no objections to this extension, is recommending it be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Commissioner Helfrey?
I'll make a motion to approve the postponement.
Okay. Seconded by Commissioner Rubis. Any discussion? All right. Voice or roll call vote? All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubus.
Yeah.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, let's see here, Mr. Vunich. Let's see here, the roundabout at 109 and BA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A recommendation report from the Departments of Planning and Public Works on a 2024 capital improvement program project, which is the construction of a new roundabout at the southern intersection of State Route 109 and State Route BA, which must be considered and acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission per state statute that stipulates such review processes for municipalities with a master plan and exercises its allowable zoning authority. This particular roundabout is straddling between wards 1 and 3.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the departments have prepared for you a recommendation report regarding a set of engineered plan sets for this proposed capital improvement. Again, a roundabout at East State Route BA and State Route 109. As many of you know, I'm sure these are two state maintained roadways, and the city has entered into a partnership with Missouri Department of Transportation and through a grant process to complete this project. The project is intended to address the safety issues with this intersection that is a skewed intersection and currently controlled one way by a stop sign with traffic on 109 not stopping. The roundabout, again, will improve sightlines, decrease the conflicts and vehicles going through the roundabout compared to this intersection as it's designed today, and will generally improve safety in the area. As a summary of just what's proposed as part of the capital improvement, it's a landscape island, as you see on some of the other roundabout projects in Wildwood. The multi-use trail that's currently at this location near this intersection is to be retained and reconstructed where needed to keep that pedestrian bicycle connection off street. The proposed light standards signposts are all proposed to be black in color. The black color theme is carried through to the guardrails with the crash-worthy end caps on them, thereby creating a more aesthetic design. And then the department's recommendation did have two items that still need to be worked out through the plans. There's a proposed chain link fence on top a retaining wall. The department's recommending the commission condition their approval on having a more aesthetically pleasing fence and at a minimum a black vinyl chain link fence if that's what Missouri Department of Transportation requires. And then the second is that there is a retaining wall and the department's recommending that the commission condition its approval that that wall be painted an appropriate color complementary to the area and similar to what you've seen at some of the other roundabouts, or maybe you didn't notice because it looks so good that you didn't notice, but just to take away the concrete type color. And so in conclusion, the department is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission support this capital improvement project. And with that, the department is available for any questions, and Mr. Brown, the Director of Public Works, is joining us via Zoom as well.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. All right, Commissioner Broyles. Do you have your mic on?
Yeah, sorry about that. Is it possible to take your pen and show us north, south, east, west?
Yes, ma'am. So if you'll find the cursor on the screen that Mr. Vunich is moving around, this is the plan sheet is reoriented to have a generally speaking north-south orientation. Okay. So the roadway that's going north-south on the page is State Route 109. The leg to the left-hand side of the page is State Route BA. Okay. And then on the other side, the east side, that is the entrance into the large Amherst substation that's there today. Okay.
So it's amazing. It's overdue.
So Ameren will have an entrance off the roundabout into their substation?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Rubus?
Whose project is this? Is this a Wildwood project or a MoDOT?
It is a partnership, and I defer to Mr. Brown if he'd like to characterize the relationship.
Thank you, Travis. It is a partnership. The city is taking the lead and we are the project sponsor. It is a state route, as Travis referenced. It's the intersection of two state roadways. So we have to work directly with MoDOT and meet their requirements and their specifications on the project. But we did get federal funding to construct the improvement, as Travis referenced. About 80% of the cost will be borne by the federal government. The city will pitch in the remaining 20%. And I would point out that the exceptions that were raised to the Department of Planning are certainly acceptable and consistent, I think, with the other projects that we've completed to the south on Route 109 in terms of the aesthetics.
Commissioner Helfrey?
On this same drawing that you have, can you show me where the retaining wall is and where the fencing is in, well, can you show me the fencing first, please? So the fencing would be on BA?
So for the retaining wall is referenced along this section.
Okay.
Here and again, the fence would go atop the retaining wall to provide a safety and a necessary safety feature.
So it would go atop of the retaining wall, fence on top of it. So, and who wants to put a chain link on it?
Right now, the plans indicate a chain link fence, but the department worked with the Department of Public Works in preparing its recommendation. And as Mr. Brown just referenced, the hope was to have a little bit improved aesthetic fence. And in the department's report, which the commission will be asked to take a vote on, we still defer to Missouri Department of Transportation requirements. If they do require that it be a chain link type fence, that it be a minimum of a black vinyl chain link fence.
Travis, I think from the department's perspective, we'd be glad to pursue a fence that would be more consistent with what we did down at the Route 100 interchange, which would be more of a aluminum style picket fence that would be black in color. And I think I would commit that we would pursue that with MoDOT rather than go forward with the chain link fence that would be black coated, if that's okay. That makes sense.
How tall is the retaining wall?
So that wall is a fill wall, so you won't see it from the roadway because the roadway would be elevated due to the embankment that the wall holds back. But it's about 5 to 7 feet in height, I think, at the highest point.
So I just would like to say that I would like to see it be a black aluminum fence simply because that's what you see every place else. I know that down in the front of our neighborhood along Strecker, you have this massive retaining wall and it's a black aluminum fence on there and it looks nice. It doesn't, you don't see it. So if there's any way that we can, really bang that one home, that'd be great.
Commissioner Helfie, I believe the Director of Public Works, Rick Brown, is committed to that and actually is taking it a step further than the Department of Planning had recommended. So I think from that perspective, the aesthetics will be improved.
Thank you very much.
So I've got one thing to say and then I'll come to you.
Okay.
My only comment on the black, like guardrails and fencing, the roundabouts at 100 and 109 those guardrails have been hit a couple times now and they aren't solid black anymore. What's the procedure for getting those like fully repaired and repainted? Because to me, they kind of look worse than if they were just steel right now.
Mr. Chair, I will defer to the Director of Public Works.
Well, that might be a discussion for another day, frankly. That is one of the concerns that we have, frankly, with the installation of the black guardrail. At the very least, it does tend to be a concern from a maintenance perspective over time. So we have been exploring other options, but ultimately the aesthetic treatments that we install become the responsibility of the city to maintain. So whether it's the black signal finish or the guardrail or whatnot, it is an obligation that we have to take on and ultimately schedule projects to address it or designate maintenance crews to address it when those needs arise.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chair, with all due respect, I would argue against your position, because if 99% of the guardrail is the black color and not chipped or scraped, I think that's a vast improvement over just the standard guardrail that you now see south of Manchester Road all the way to the city of Eureka, that's shiny, gray, and is about as unappealing in that setting as it could be. Thank you.
Oh, I don't know. To me, the silver blends in with the rock that along the edge, but
Well, I would argue there is no rock at this location.
just saying. Commissioner Broyles.
Okay, you guys okay now? Okay. Mr. Brown, could you explain a little bit about the lighting? Because I know how dark it is there now.
I can provide you.
For
a
Mr. Brown.
more- Yes, I can provide you the roundabout will be illuminated, as was the practice and essentially the requirement of MoDOT. And the roundabouts to the south do have lights. Now, the roundabout at this location will feature 30-foot poles. And those are actually shorter than the ones that were utilized down at Pond Grover Loop Road and at the Route 100 interchange. So
I'm
they will
having a
be-
hard time hearing you. I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do my best to talk up, but
Oh,
the
no, you're
roundabout
fine
will-
now.
Okay, the roundabout will be illuminated as was done with the roundabouts to the south at Pond Grover Loop Road and at the interchange with Route 100. Lighting is a requirement of MoDOT's, and so we will be continuing that practice. At this location, there will be actually essentially two 30-foot poles on each approach of the roundabout, or one on the approach and then one at the roundabout, a total of 6 poles essentially, because there's 3 legs for this roundabout that would be installed to illuminate it.
That was helpful. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Rubis.
Is, when we paint the retaining walls, is that a maintenance, ongoing maintenance, or is there a pigment in the concrete first installed?
I'd be glad to address that. The practice has been in the past to paint the walls, and we can follow suit at this location as well. This will be a larger block wall. It won't be the smaller stone style wall that you might have seen elsewhere, but a larger block wall. And we can follow with a stain and choose a color that's appropriate, whether it's one similar to what we've used previously or not. But we will certainly follow suit with that regard.
And Commissioner Rubis, if I could add, with the permission of the chair, we actually did the same treatment at Community Park. So many of those walls you see when you enter off of Route 100, those were that white block, which is less expensive. And then we stained it, and we haven't had to do anything to it since we opened in August of 2015.
Commissioner Depler.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. So yeah, I just wanted to make 2 cents that, having it consistent with the rest of the roundabouts on 109 would be a benefit to me, having the black aluminum fencing and the stained block that coincides with the colors in other areas. I also had the question, is there any plan to have another roundabout at the other intersection of BA and 109 further north?
I'd be glad to address that as best I can. At the moment, there is no plan in the works or funded. There's no project funded at that location for a roundabout. MoDOT is beginning construction this spring on the roundabout at Wild Horse Creek Road in 109, immediately to the north of that location. So that project you'll see under construction very soon. And then we will follow hopefully with this one later this year.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask about that. So the north one,
Important to have that one there too, because I think that's almost more dangerous than the one proposed now.
Yeah, but I've noticed they've started cutting trees down up at Wild Horse, so that's gonna be finished, I guess, sometime this summer. Or,
We have asked MoDOT to provide us a schedule for the construction completion for the 109 Wild Horse Creek Road roundabout. We've not received it yet. Don't know that I would go out of my way to say that it'd be completed yet this year. I would expect it to be probably more along the line of a year duration, maybe a little bit more. So possibly next springtime or early, or say June of next year is my expectation.
okay, and then, so this one will start before that one's finished construction?
That is correct. We are working with Ameren to acquire the easement and the property necessary to construct this roundabout. And we also have to move water, gas, and Ameren poles out of the way before we can start construction. So I'm estimating we're still got about 6 months before we really can start building this roundabout at this location.
Okay, and then last question from me. Is there any plans for widening 109 to make it 4-lane north of Clayton yet?
So the department is hoping to move forward with a study of the section of 109 to the south from BA South down to Clayton Road. We did budget some money this year in the capital improvements program for a study that would essentially do a conceptual engineering analysis of that segment of road and recommend improvements based on the future traffic volumes. I think it's envisioned that there would be additional lane potentially at least to the south, and the installation of a raised median, along with intersection improvements at Clayton Road and Shepherd Road. So that's something that we'd like to bring through the city council in the next month or so for their approval, and then start on that study. That would probably take 6 to 9 months to complete.
All right, thank you. Any, Commissioner Ruiz? Motion by Commissioner Rubis, second by Councilman Brost. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Rubis.
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes. Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
and Mayor Boland. Motion is approved.
Thank you. Next, improvements to Taylor Road. And looks like Manchester Road as well. Mr. Vernich?
Thank you. The second item is a recommendation report from the Departments of Planning and Public Works on a 2024 capital improvement program project, which is the reworking of Taylor Road between Manchester Road and State Route 100, including signal modifications, resurfacing of their roadway, and other adjustments to public infrastructure situated at this location, which must be considered and acted upon by the Planning and Zoning Commission per state statute that stipulates such review processes for municipalities with a master plan and exercises its allowable zoning authority. This particular project is in wards 5 and 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vernich. Mr. Newberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department, again, is with the Department of Public Works is presenting a set of engineered plans for some improvements that were just described into the record. Just a few quick exhibits here on the screen. The first location is at this end, the east end of Manchester Road, where it intersects with State Route 100. And then the other area of improvements can be shown here. It's Taylor Road north of the roundabout at Manchester Road, and then Village Hills Parkway to the south to Victoria Crossing. That's the nature of the locations for these proposed improvements. So the improvements include resurfacing of the roadway, removal of pavement where needed, replacement of surface where needed. And the other major categories of the improvements associated with this item are signal improvements at key locations along the corridor. And those signal improvements include new traffic signal standards with the LED edge lit signs that you see at other locations in this part of town center, as well as some light standards associated with those signal poles. They are planned to be decorative and black in color to be consistent with the city's town center aesthetic. And then the improvements also include coordination with other MoDOT signals in the area to improve that level of service, which Mr. Brown can speak to more if he'd like to. Other improvements associated with this capital improvement project are the replacement of certain sections of sidewalks, changes to the configurations of intersections, pedestrian intersections with the roadways to be compliant with the most recent ADA requirements. And then also the restriping of the roadway where the surface has been replaced. And if you look through some of the plan sheets, the striping includes the retention of the bike lane facility on Manchester Road, as well as the addition of a stop block at one of the stop lights so that cyclists can queue in front of the vehicles. And then there's also a network of crossings closer to State Route 100 dedicated for cyclists and striped accordingly in a green color. The bike lane will also be in a green color where there are conflict points with with vehicles like turn lanes and intersections. There's other curb and pavement replacements that are outlined in the report. And again, some of the intersections have been reconfigured, like the intersection at Main Street and Taylor Road, and that was to be in compliance with ADA requirements, accommodate large vehicles, but also not create such a large intersection that it takes away the character of the town center. And one last item I'll mention, anywhere where there's existing pigmented crossing walks, those are proposed to be retained or reconstructed with a pigmented surface for those crosswalks and then restriped. So in conclusion, the department is recommending approval of this item. It did identify a few conditions that are fairly standard as far as having the fire district weigh in on some of the reconfigure of the intersections to ensure that those are acceptable to the fire district. And then we also made a note that the proposed light fixture on the signal itself is a little taller than what we would typically do, but the department, the department supports it as it's proposed. So with that, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Any questions?
Commissioner Helfrey?
I just have one question, and that is with the improvements at Taylor Road and Manchester Road. I know that that property is getting ready. I thought they were going to be starting construction on that stuff this year sometime.
So for your question is if we're coordinating with the project, the mixed use project that's been approved by the city. I think Mr. Brown probably have the response to that.
Okay, thanks.
We are doing our best to coordinate. That is the intent, is to coordinate our plans with their plans. Sometimes that can be a moving target, but we're doing our best. We have just recently wrapped up the acquisition of easements and are awaiting a final submittal of plans and specifications from our consultant, hopefully very soon within the next day or two. And then after we get approval from MoDOT, we'd like to bid the project hopefully by April or thereabouts, so we can start work this summer. But as well as we can, we will be coordinating with them and making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I would mention, Travis, you referenced the lighting, and the lighting on the new signal poles is actually a little different on what we're proposing. So it won't be as high as had been done in the past. So it'll be about maybe 20 feet to the lowest point on the light on the mast arm. It'll be actually on the vertical post, and it should mimic our town center style luminaires. So it'll be a much more aesthetic look than the older style steel posts and mast arms that MoDOT had typically used in the past. And then one final comment, if I may, the intersections, and you referenced this, we looked at the intersections with Taylor and Main, and then the Deerbrook South entrance for truck access. Those are a little challenging primarily to navigate, even in a passenger car, frankly, to make some turning movements, mainly that left out to go southbound. So we have shaved back some of the noses on the median islands a bit and revised some of the geometry on the curb line to provide a little bit more room for larger vehicles and the ability to make some of those turns. So it will be an improvement in that regard in the future. And we coordinated very closely with Deerbergs on that as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Speaking of the intersection of like Taylor and Main and Taylor and 100, one thing I've noticed is, when you're coming off 100, you've got the two left turn lanes to go onto Taylor, and the right one dumps you onto Main Street at the next light going westbound, and then the left one is the access to Deerbergs and southbound on Taylor. I feel like the left lane has a whole lot more traffic by default than the right lane, with a lot of that traffic going into Deerbergs. Could there be any consideration to restriping the middle lane there to direct the left lane into Deerbergs and the right lane to go south on Taylor and onto Main Street? Do you gather where I'm going?
I believe I do, Chairman, Chair Beatty. The part of the improvement project process was to do a traffic study, to really look at that very thing. Because as Travis mentioned, one of the goals with this project was to improve the traffic coordination, the traffic flow on and off of Route 100. So we did evaluate the feasibility of actually adding a separate left turn lane, another left turn lane into Deerbergs off of southbound Taylor Road, and ultimately we rolled it out. And the goal is that with better coordination between the signals, we can improve that flow of traffic into Deerbergs and kind of eliminate that need for that additional lane. So ultimately we decided that it really wasn't necessary, provided we can get the traffic to flow better from 100 onto Taylor Road southbound.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not asking for an additional lane. I just think if you had the middle stripe on southbound Taylor, curve over to direct the left lane into Deerbergs and then the right lane to stay south on Taylor, I think that would distribute the traffic at the light a lot more evenly between the two lanes. Because my experience turning in there is that you'll get 7 or 8 cars in the left lane for every one you get in the right lane. Well, I mean, on 100, there's the 2 left turn lanes. So the far left one gets almost all of the cars stacking up. And then the right left turn lane hardly gets any. Unless there's something going on at Town Center, I guess.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I also think that, as Mr. Brown referenced, we've been conducting traffic studies in this area since Mr. Cohn and other developers have proposed projects at that southwest quadrant of the intersection. And so with the new apartment complex, the addition of the single-family dwellings, the pickleball courts, and then the extension of Main Street to the west toward Etherton Road and Route 109, I actually think you'll see an increased utilization of that right turn lane that's dedicated now.
Yeah, no, and if we ever finish Main Street, I totally understand. But as long as Main Street is a dead end, I feel like most of the traffic is going to continue south.
Well, I do have some good news there as well. Mr. Brown and I and others with the Department of Planning and Public Works have been meeting with a consultant through an authorization by City Council to look into the extension of Main Street. So we're actually in the early stages of planning and design for a Main Street extension that isn't necessarily all dependent on developer funds.
Okay, well, that's a pleasant surprise. Maybe extending it will spur some development. Commissioner Helfrey?
Are you looking for a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
And the motion is to approve?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Helfrey, second by Commissioner Rubus. Any further discussion? All right, sorry, one last comment or question, and then I'll roll call vote. Is the resurfacing going to be blacktop or concrete?
Will be an asphalt overlay.
Okay, thank you. All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Rubus, Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler.
Yes.
Commissioner Depler votes yes. Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost. Yes. Mayor Boland. Motion is passed.
Motion
Thank you.
carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Newberry, an update on this, let's see, stormwater management master plan.
Yes, an update on the submittal of requests for qualifications to develop a stormwater master plan. Excuse me, stormwater management master plan for the city of Wildwood's 9 distinct watersheds as recommended by the Wildwood Watershed Erosion Task Force, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, this is a no action item and I will only take a few seconds. But there is a watershed erosion task force. Many of you know of it, and there have been a few items that have been presented to you over the course of the last 3+ years. Recently, the Watershed Erosion Task Force recommended a request for qualifications be developed and submitted to the contracting community, consulting community for a stormwater management master plan. This would be the first the city has had in its 28+ year history. The request for qualifications was issued at the beginning of December, and ultimately we received 5 responses. Those responses will be reviewed by the Watershed Erosion Task Force and ultimately City Council, but the outcome of that process will be before the Planning and Zoning Commission at some future point. So tonight it's just an informational item, so you kind of know what the left hand or the right hand is doing versus the other. If there are any questions, Mr. Brown, Mr. Newberry, and I would be glad to try to answer them at this time. And I'll also mention Ms. Ripito as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any questions? All right, seeing none, how about a motion to adjourn? All right, motion by Commissioner Rubus, second by Commissioner Clayton. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstain? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We
Under
appreciate
2
it.
hours. How